Okay, so this is going to be another one for you, Hardium. Hopefully, I'm going to just display this quick picture over our Discord so that this helps you a little bit. Hopefully this helps you to go through and model your guns. So we see this little plus looking sign here. I can see that it extends into the back. I can see that these cubes here extend off to the side, this cube in the back, this cube tapered. This appears to be another cube, a cylinder, cube with a T. So I'm going to break down the theory for how we're going to do this, and hopefully you can see my mouse in the video. So first, I'm going to create this bottom layer here as a plus sign. So I'm going to go into soft image. Sorry, clicked the wrong primitive cube. I'm going to extend it downwards. Now I know that I want this at 0 position, so I'm going to go Y0, extend this over, and I want my depth to be about there, right? Okay, now I'm going to extend this backwards. I'm going to scale it so that it's relatively even, to be about there. Go backwards Z, move it to about there so that we are approximately at origin. Look back at my reference picture, it sort of tapers upwards, so I'm going to scale it along the Z-axis, move it slightly, and that appears to be roughly about the taper that I want here. Now I'm going to Control D, I'm going to move this downwards along the Z-axis. I am then going to, because I want a plus sign, Control D again, and I am going to scale this yet again, this direction, and then outward. And hopefully that's about the shape that we want. Now I'm going to select these two side ones here, Control D. I'm going to go along my Y-axis locally, not going to work, global X-axis. Extend it out to be about there. Now I am going to, because it actually tapers slightly upwards from here, I'm going to select all of these, lower it to about the appropriate proportional height, select this edge and this edge, and I'm going to move these downwards to give myself a nice even taper. Now, from here, I'm going to create this cube here. This is going to be mostly one cube. So I'm going to start with a primitive cube. I'm going to scale it to be about appropriate to what I want. I'm going to enter shaded mode so that I can see more clearly what I'm doing. I'm going to move forward along the Z-axis, look approximately where I want it, which is at the front of here. Move this downwards so that it's merging into the mesh. Move it backwards along the Z-axis. Sorry, it should be moved backwards along the global Z-axis. Excellent. Now I'm going to, because it has this little taper here, I'm going to select, first off, which actually should be a little bit thicker along the X-axis. I'm going to select this, and I'm going to move it down along the Y-axis, and then slightly inwards along the Z-axis to give it that nice little taper. Okay, now selecting the back, I'm going to Control D to extrude it. I'm going to scale it upwards along the X and Y axes like so. Now I can see that it doesn't have much on the X-axis here, so I'm actually going to scale it more along the Y-axis. Now that we are there, I'm going to hit Control D and bring it all the way back. Now, I can see from here that it has these nice little curves on it. So I'm going to select, this edge, and I'm going to go Model, Polymesh, Bevel Components. That'll give it a nice curve, but I want it slightly more curved. So under rounding, I'm going to go number of subdivisions 1. And I am going to decrease its sharpness slightly so that we get the nice little rounded shape. Okay, so now we want our cylinder here so that we can start stacking these on top of it. So I'm going to go through, create a new cylinder primitive. I'm going to assume subdivisions of 12, 1, and 1. I am now going to rotate this 90 degrees. Done. Move it into position. and it should be relatively center to this wing. And then I'm just going to go ahead and butt it up to the mesh, scale it down slightly. And then I'm going to bring this in. Okay, so now I'm going to Control D. I'm going to go scale it, X and Z axis, to about here. Control D, move it all the way over along the X axis to about here. Control D, rescale it upwards. Rescale it upwards along the Z and X axis until it's relatively equal with this. This is for a mod. It does not have to be perfect. Don't spend your time making it overly geometrically accurate, or you'll just be wasting your time. And now I need to move this over slightly, so I'm going to go T, select all of them, move over my points until I'm about there. I'm relatively satisfied with that. Okay, so next I want this little T-turret thing. I'm going to create a cube, make it a length of 1, move it up, move it over. Now I can see in the image it's a lot thinner along here, so I'm going to lower this to be about the proper proportions. Move it backwards. Right. And now we can actually see that it still extends off the back there. Now we're going to correct that in a second, but first let's get the cube fully figured out. I'm going to move this over. I'm going to click this little face here, model, polymesh, slice polygons. I know that I need 2 slices. They have to be distributed, and it should be along the Z-axis. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these two, Control D to extrude, move this one up slightly, and I'm going to move this one up slightly more, Control D again to extrude, like so. Okay, so I'm relatively satisfied with that shape as well. Now, finally I'm going to create a new cylinder. I am going to rotate it 90 degrees along the x-axis so that it faces that direction. Move it up. Move it over. Scale it down to be relatively appropriate. I'm going to go into hidden line removal so that I can actually see where it is, since at this point everything in the mesh is going to start blending. I'm now going to move it back so that it meets into that part of the mesh. Move it slightly more inwards. I'm going to select all of these, and I'm going to move it outwards, like so. Right. Now there's these little rings here, and I know that you're trying to do the details here. This can all be done with a normal map later, so can all these lines. Don't make a high detailed geometry, because you're going to make it harder on the game engine. So all that we're going to do is we're going to extend this outward. We are then going to scale it along the X and Y axis to make it slightly tapered. Control D to extrude the edges that we have. And we are going to scale those inwards, Control D, and now we move it along the Z axis to make a nice little barrel, and that is it. Now I'm going to Control D, move it over to be about equidistant, Control D, should save your transforms. Move all of these over until you are relatively satisfied. Select this, and press Model, Polymesh, Symmetrize Polygons. I'll make it relatively out there. And now for the final little tapered piece of cube at the back here, we are just going to create a brand new cube, size of 1, move it back, move it up, move it over. Now we can see it goes basically to the top of here. That's all that we're going to do. Now if I go here, I want to extend this outwards, like so, and then I'm going to want to select this edge, bring it down, like that. I believe that should be relatively good enough. No, it has actually slightly less of a taper than that. It's more along these lines here. And then in terms of that, the gun I'm looking at now should actually be, this should be slightly higher because the gun should not be quite that large along the cylinder. That is mostly my fault. And it might be easier just to scale down the cylinder at this point. Select all those, delete. Move these over. And then resymmetrize. I didn't exactly do a dry run for this, so I'm kind of just going in heat of the moment on this. So excuse me if I make some mistakes. Symmetrize polygons, and that should be it. That should be all. Finally, I'm going to select all of those, assume that I want them to be merged. I'm going to merge them. I am going to set my tolerance to 0, merge, delete. And that is it. Your gun is done.